Now we're going to go over the workflows. I want to start with run a vehicle and run many vehicles. And then I'll move on to edit and run a vehicle and edit a vehicle. And while we're using all this for workflows, I'll also touch on this analyze data. So let's start with run a vehicle. Once you click on it, it'll open a new tab. You'll have here a tree with all the vehicles that you have available in your library. So I'm gonna go ahead and select a Class A long haul truck conventional right here. So I'm gonna click on it and it's going to load the image with all the vehicle components in this vehicle. It'll also load up the vehicle information in here. And if you click on the file name, it'll open the actual vehicle file. So at the top, you'll have the display name, which is the one that you'll see in the tree, in the GUI. You'll see the description that you can see in the vehicle information. You also have the group, which is where you'll find this vehicle in the tree, and you can edit that as well. And you have your diagram name and your executable. The diagram name can be very useful if you have multiple vehicles that use the same model, but maybe have different parameters, but they could still share that same model. So it can save you simulation time because you can load that exact model rather than creating multiple models for the different vehicles. I'm going to close here and I'm going to continue. There are two more tabs, tab 2, change parameters and change files. So you could still make changes. You could still edit the vehicle in this workflow, but I would recommend to use the other interface, workflow, edit and run a vehicle because of the interface. It's just easier to make the changes. But if you wanted to make a small change in here, you could still do it. You also have two buttons here, eval and build. So eval will load that vehicle into your autonomy, your MATLAB command window. So I'm gonna hit eval. Okay, now you have all the values of the vehicle, the parameters loaded into your command window. So I want to show you before we move into the, I want to show you that you can use distant path and change to filter through all your parameters. So for example, I want to go into my engine plant, and right now I only have checked overwritten. So these are the parameters that are overwritten in my vehicle, but I can also see all the parameters that can be overwritable. You also see that this engine plant scale power max, so this is the maximum engine power, is at 363 kilowatts, but when I go to my command window, you'll see that this parameter is in watts. So this has to do with the Amber define units. If we go here again, just to recap what we have seen in previous videos, you have your power here in watts in the system. So that's the data that you'll see in your command window. But once you load up that data into Amber, you'll see it in kilowatts. In here, the default is just the parameters that you have in the vehicle, but you can edit this value. So if I wanted, I could do 380 and I'll click away. You'll also see that all of these parameters are not loaded. So once I move to the change parameters, I would have to eval again so that my parameters get loaded up. You can still look at those in your command window. But yeah, so this did load up. If they're empty, they might not be overwritten or they don't have a value. But now you see that all my engine plan parameters have been loaded up. We can move to the next one and you'll see that you can change the files here too. You'll always start with the init files. You can make changes here. Let me pick another one. You can drag and drop. So I'll click on it and drag it here, and I can make that change. You could do the same with scaling, pre-processing, and post-processing files. Like I mentioned again, like I would use the other workflow to edit and run. But in here, if you have any small changes, this is a quick and easy way to do it. So then you go to the next tab where you select your process. And I want to go to my user and pick my example cycle. And in here, I can add a grade, add the number of repetitions, so I could run this cycle multiple times. I can scale it up, or I can request a longer distance. Here's some of the cycle information that is coming from your CH metadata. If you remember, we had all this information. You can run as many cycles as you want. So I'm going to go into the test. I'm going to run my cycle number 2. And at the end of the cycle list, you'll also have this SOC correction, which you can check. And this is relevant when we're running hybrid vehicles and we want to run charge sustaining runs. So I'm going to uncheck, but we can go to that SOC correction tab and you'll see that you can select the number of iterations. So we usually do 10, the tolerance for your SOC, the minimum and maximum values for your SOC, and the first and second value for those iterations. I'm going to go back to my process selector, and there's also the parametric study, which I'm going to check. I can check, and I can go to my parametric study tab. And let's say I want to run a sweep on my final drive. So it'll show you all the components that you can sweep. But I'm going to go to my gearbox, plan, init. Oh, sorry. Final drive. And it's in my vehicle dynamics. So I have my final drive here, plan, init. Or you could just simply tab if you already know the name of the parameter. So I have my final drive, plan, init ratio. And I'm gonna add a value, which will be my default, and I can go back to here and see my final plan init ratio is 3.13. So I can add another value, and I want this to be 4. And let me go back to my process selector, and I have the parametric study for both cycles, and in my parametric study I have 2 values. So I should run a total of 4 runs. So I'm going to go to my 5th tab, which is run simulation, and I'm going to run, I think usually set to 1, but I'm going to run 4 parallel runs. So my Ember is going to launch 4 MATLAB sessions to run in parallel. So I'm going to hit launch, and it is useful to run in parallel, but it's also keep in mind of your computer capabilities, so that the simulations don't crash because your computer can't process all the simulations at the same time. You can see that I open multiple command windows and it's building models. I'm going to pause this while it runs. It should take a few minutes. So after it's done running, it'll automatically take you to tab number 6, which is data analysis. And it's a very similar, it's the same workflow as analyze data. So I'll just open it for you for you all to see. So it's the same tab. So I'm gonna close this analyze data. So it automatically load all the simulations that you run, and you'll see we have 4 simulations. The cycle name, the highway, it's the example cycle 1, and then the example cycle 2 is that one. It's just the cycle name that we had in the metadata. But you'll also, I'm going to scroll down. This is all automatically populated by Amber. I'm going to scroll down to my maximum power. It's 380 because we had edited in the change parameters here in the 380. I'm going to go back to my tab number 6, and I'm going to scroll down to my final drive. So I run it first with 4, and then I run it with 3.1316, which is the default value. You can also go into your right and you'll see you have signals and parameters, and you can drag and drop any other value that you want to see. And here you can also hit open, and it'll open a tab. It's loading. It'll open a tab here, which is the summary of your run. You'll have the efficiency maps, the efficiency of all your components. And at the top, there's just the fuel economy, SOC, region, all that data in there. So you can close it. I could also go back to my energy use and it'll show me for all my runs, also the efficiencies for all my runs, and I could go to plots and I could go into my data panel and go to signals so I can see, for example, my engine torque out, and it'll plot all my 4 simulations. So it'll load all your simulations in one plot. You can double click the one plot and it'll take a little bit, but it'll load the, actually it didn't take long, but it'll load your data into a MATLAB figure and you can save it. You can save it from here or you can simply save it from here. For this um, plots, you can also scale it. So let's say I want to scale it up, or I can just leave it as is. You could also delete any plot. So if you just want to see simulation 1, you could just delete everything else. You can try the linear speed of the vehicle and you'll see all of them. So the different cycles and the different runs with the different final drive ratios. I'm going to go back to main results, and you can click on each file and it'll load up the data here. But you can also open it like I showed you before, and you also have access to other MATLAB predefined plots. So you have the plot data very similar to the one you have in the summary, then the energy, but this one will only show you the energy for that run. You also have the energy consumption, and you have these plots for that specific run. Efficiency, very similar to what we had seen in the summary tab. We also have this MATLAB predefined plots. So I'm gonna run, for example, the operating points of my engine map, and it'll create this MATLAB plot of that specific run. So these are all so this is very similar to the data analysis. So I'm going to go back to this workflows and I'm going to open analyze data. And you'll see that is the same interface, but I could hit load simulation results. And here's my 4 simulation results that I just run. So I can click on individual folder and load that data.mat, or I could just hit the results folder and load all of them at the same time. So I'm going to load all of them. And you'll see that I'll essentially have the same workspace and that I hadn't run a vehicle because it does use the analyze data workflow in there automatically. But if you run some simulations using your MATLAB, then you could come into Ember and load your simulation results and then get all the plots and all the MATLAB predefined plots as well. So I'm going to close this analyze data. You can also have this export to Excel function, which is useful so you can get this table into an Excel file. If you go into your Amber 2022 project session 1, you'll see your results folders were saved here, and in this results folder you have that a vehicle file that you run with any of the changes that you made, your data that in it, which is when you eval your vehicle, and it's all the parameters that are in your vehicle, and your data that Matt has the initial parameters from the vehicle and also the simulation signals, and you have the summary, which, let me open it, and it's what you usually see when you open this simulation. So I'm gonna hit open. I'm gonna go back to my Amber, hit open, and I think I have already opened it, but it opens this HTML, which is the same one, the same one. You'll also have the SLX model that you use in this run, and you'll have the same for all the simulation runs that we just did. So I'm also going to show you the Excel file that we generated. So I saved it into the session 1 folder, and here is the XML file. So I'm going to open it up. You'll see that we have the same results or data from that we had in here. So if you want it, you could add any other parameters that you find useful and then export that into so you can just search here in it, and then you could just put your mass. You can do drag and drop any parameters that you would want in that Excel file. So this is it for the run a vehicle workflow. So I'm going to close it up. Now let's move on to the next workflow, which is the run many vehicles. And this is going to be similar to the run a vehicle. You'll have the same tree with the vehicles that you can select from. So I'm going to go to heavy duty and I'm going to pick my same long haul truck. And I can add another, let's say, a transit. So I can pick multiple vehicles. I won't get the same view of my components, but I'll just get the name. And I won't get at the bottom, we used to get the description, so I won't have that, but I'll have the processes instead, so I can drag and drop. So let's do some medium duty cycles. We can do a generic steady speed. So my EPA 65 and my EPA 55. And these 2 cycles are going to run on those 2 vehicles. You can also add a parameter. So I can here and change, find the parameter that I want to change. So if we want to do something similar, we could do a final drive, change, and it'll show me here. Or we can do a change in the scaling of the engine or in the efficiency. And you can also remove it. So if you expand here the run cycle, you'll also have the SOC correction, and it's set to false, but you can set it to true, and then you can go into here and do the same SOC correction process as the one I show in the run a vehicle, where you select your number of iterations, etc. I'm going to close this. I'm going to click away. You can also add a system file, which means you can change a file in the vehicle, but I would not recommend doing this. I think it's easier if to use the other edit and run a vehicle workflow. So this is useful when you're running multiple vehicles and you want them to run multiple cycles. So on our run a vehicle process, we also have a number of parallel runs that we wanted to run. So I can change it up here. So it's very similar work like parameters that you can adjust for the runs. They're just in different places since you are running multiple vehicles in this case. So you could just run simulation and that will load up my command window, and it should load up multiple command windows. And then it will take me, once the simulation runs are done, it'll take me directly into the data analysis workflow, very similar to what happened or what we did with the run a vehicle. I'm gonna pause and then I'll come back when this is done. It's just gonna take a few minutes. Okay, now that the simulation's done, it took me to my data analysis and it loaded up my 4 simulation runs. So you'll see here that I have my long haul, and they run over the 65 and the 55. And then my last 2 are my transit trucks, over the 65 and the 55. I have a very similar or identical workspace as I had with the run a vehicle. You can open here and it'll take you to the HTML file that Ember automatically generates. So there's not that many difference in terms of like the results that you're getting. It's just in this workflow, you're able to run multiple vehicles, and in this one, you're only able to run one vehicle. Before we move on, I want to show you that you can load up this data as well. And then I can go to my command window and I can see, for example, my linear speed. I'm going to plot my time simu, which is my time signal, and I'm going to plot my linear speed out simu. So you'll see that this plot is different than this plot is because my data here is in my systems units, and in here we'll have the units that we select as users. So if you load up that data in your command window or in your MATLAB, you'll get the systems. So I just wanted to remind you of that, but you can also load up that data there in case there's a specific parameter that you want to look at, especially when it comes to some maps. You could, for example, my engine that planted in it, if I wanted to see some of my maps, whichever map you want, like my emissions map or my fuel map, then I could use this command window to see those maps easier